Right now, the January 2026 Winter Storm Fern is officially over, but the crisis in the United States is not. As of February 7th, 2026, at least 153 people have died across more than 20 states. Hundreds of thousands remain without power, and meteorologists are already warning that another winter storm system is approaching the same communities that are still trying to recover. The storm that meteorologists called Winter Storm Fern swept through more than 40 states between January 23rd and January 27th. It stretched from the Mexico border all the way to the Canadian Maritimes, from Texas to Tennessee, from New York to New England. According to the National Weather Service, more than 230 million people were under some form of winter weather alert during the height of the storm. Tonight, the death toll stands at 153 confirmed fatalities. That number includes 25 deaths in Mississippi, another 25 in Tennessee, 16 in Kentucky, 16 more in New York City alone. According to state emergency management agencies, the causes of death range from hypothermia and carbon monoxide poisoning to vehicle accidents on ice-covered highways and medical emergencies during power outages. The power situation remains critical. At the storm's peak on January 25th, more than 1 million customers lost electricity. As of this week, hundreds of thousands across Louisiana, Tennessee, and parts of New York still do not have heat or light. Entergy Louisiana announced on January 31st that full power restoration would not happen until February 5th, nearly 2 weeks after the storm began. In Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, over 1,000 Con Edison customers remain in the dark. And now, a new system is developing. The National Weather Service has issued winter storm warnings for 15 states, including Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. Forecasters are predicting another 8 inches of snow or more in areas that are still digging out from the last storm. Here is the important part. This was not just a single extreme weather event. Winter Storm Fern was the deadliest winter storm in North America since Winter Storm Uri in 2021, which killed at least 290 people during the Texas power crisis. And the systems that failed then are failing again now. And the maps and satellite loops, you can watch how it all came together. Around January 22nd, 2026, a cold core low-pressure system began forming over the Pacific Ocean near the Baja California Peninsula. According to NOAA, the system was driven by a wave in the upper atmosphere that stretched and elongated the polar vortex, pulling Arctic air southward from northern Canada and Alaska. That frigid air mass collided with moisture streaming in from 2 directions, the Pacific coast and the Gulf of Mexico. By January 23rd, the system had crossed the Rocky Mountains and settled over the Great Plains. NOAA sent a Hurricane Hunter aircraft, a Gulfstream IVSP, directly into the developing storm to collect atmospheric data and improve forecast accuracy. What meteorologists found was alarming. The storm was rapidly intensifying. The system tracked eastward across the central United States, dropping a continuous band of wintry precipitation. Parts of New Mexico received 31 inches of snow. Oklahoma City recorded 4.4 inches on January 24th, breaking a daily snowfall record that had stood since 1948. Kansas City International Airport saw 5.2 inches, shattering a 1956 record. But it was the ice that caused the most damage. As the storm moved across Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee, warm air aloft created the perfect conditions for freezing rain. According to the National Weather Service, ice accumulations reached up to 1 inch in multiple locations. In Nashville, Tennessee, meteorologists called it the worst ice storm the region had seen in decades. Tree branches coated in ice snapped under the weight, power lines collapsed, roads became impassable. By January 25th, the system had reached the Northeast, where it underwent what meteorologists call Miller-B cyclogenesis. A secondary low-pressure system formed off the southeast coast and rapidly strengthened as it moved northward. The storm became a nor'easter. Heavy snow began falling from Pennsylvania to Maine. At the peak of Winter Storm Fern, over 245 million people across more than 40 states were under winter weather warnings or advisories. The storm stretched nearly 2,000 miles from end to end. It was one of the largest winter storms in recorded U.S. history. The infrastructure impacts were immediate and catastrophic. More than 1 million customers lost power at the storm's peak. According to AccuWeather, that number reached 1,000 on January 25th and remained above 700,000 for days afterward. Tennessee alone recorded more than 250,000 outages. Nashville Electric Service reported the highest number of simultaneous power failures in the company's history, 230,000 customers in the dark at once. Mississippi saw nearly 300,000 outages. Louisiana's numbers climbed above 51,000, with many customers told they would not see power restored for 2 weeks. The aviation system collapsed. According to flight tracking data from FlightAware, more than 20,000 flights were canceled between January 23rd and January 26th. On January 25th alone, over 11,000 flights were grounded, making it the worst day for cancellations since March 30th, 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport canceled more than 1,000 flights. LaGuardia Airport in New York closed entirely at 1,000 feet. Reagan National Airport grounded all departures. By mid-morning on January 26th, according to satellite imagery from NASA, over half of the contiguous United States was covered in snow. In some areas, temperatures plummeted to levels not seen in decades. Seagull, Minnesota recorded negative 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Grand Rapids, Michigan dropped to negative 19 degrees, the coldest temperature there since 1994. By the time the storm finally weakened and moved offshore on January 27th, at least 153 people had lost their lives across the United States and Canada. Walk into one of the emergency shelters still open tonight. Gym floors are lined with cots and folded blankets. Children play quietly with donated toys, while their parents huddle around extension cords trying to charge phones. The air smells like instant coffee and donated pizza. People speak in low voices about when the power might come back on. According to the American Red Cross, more than 125 warming centers and emergency shelters were opened across the impacted states during the height of Winter Storm Fern. Red Cross volunteers, working alongside state emergency management agencies and the Salvation Army, provided food, water, and temporary heating for tens of thousands of people. According to FEMA, the federal government prepositioned 250,000 meals and 400,000 liters of water at Camp Minden, Louisiana before the storm even arrived. But the humanitarian crisis extended far beyond shelter capacity. The storm forced the cancellation of hundreds of blood donation events across the country. According to reports from regional blood banks, the disruptions came at a time when supplies were already stretched thin. Hospitals in storm-affected areas warned that surgeries and trauma treatments could be delayed if donations did not resume quickly. Blood supply networks, which depend on consistent daily collections, saw inventory levels drop significantly during the week-long storm. They are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. In New York, the situation remains critical. According to the New York City Mayor's office, 16 people died on the streets from cold exposure during the storm. Mayor Zoran Mamdani confirmed on February 2nd that most of the victims were homeless or suffering from mental illness. The city activated Code Blue protocols, opening emergency warming centers and deploying outreach teams to check on vulnerable individuals. But the deaths have raised difficult questions about whether the city's response was adequate. In Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, more than 1,000 Con Edison customers have been without power for days. According to NY1 News, the outages began after last week's snowstorm damaged electrical equipment. Crews are working around the clock, but restoration has been slow. Residents have described running extension cords to neighbors' homes, sharing generators, and sleeping in winter coats under multiple blankets. New York received 11.4 inches of snow in Central Park, breaking a daily snowfall record. In some areas north of the city, accumulations exceeded 20 inches. Schools across the state were closed for multiple days. Travel bans were enacted in Ulster County and Dutchess County. And now, with another winter storm forecast for this weekend, officials are warning residents to prepare for additional power outages and hazardous travel conditions. In Tennessee, the ice storm crippled Nashville and surrounding counties. According to Nashville Electric Service, the 230,000 simultaneous power outages represented the worst infrastructure failure in company history. Governor Bill Lee declared a state of emergency for the entire state on January 22nd before the storm even arrived. By January 26th, Tennessee still recorded more than 250,000 customers without electricity. The state's death toll climbed to 25, including hypothermia victims, vehicle accident fatalities, and cardiac emergencies during snow removal. Nashville set a precipitation record on January 24th with 1.92 inches, much of it freezing rain. Roads became ice rinks. Interstate highways were shut down. Emergency responders reported over 160 weather-related crashes across the state, with 18 injuries. Across Tennessee, as many as 300,000 people lost power as ice-laden tree branches collapsed onto power lines. They are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. Louisiana, Mississippi, and Kentucky face similar crises. Louisiana reported 9 deaths, including 5 from hypothermia and 2 from carbon monoxide poisoning when residents used improper heating methods during the blackout. Mississippi confirmed 25 fatalities and nearly 300,000 power outages at the storm's peak. Kentucky reported 16 deaths, with officials warning that the death toll could rise as recovery efforts continue. Here is the important part. Tennessee, a state that rarely sees ice storms of this magnitude, has extended its statewide emergency order. Schools in North Louisiana remain closed through January 30th, 6 days after the storm passed. And utility companies across the South are telling customers that full restoration may take until mid-February. Federal response has been swift but strained. According to FEMA, President Trump approved 12 emergency declarations in what officials called a historic amount in record time. FEMA has allocated more than $11 million in expedited emergency response funding to Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The Department of Energy issued an emergency order on January 27th to mitigate blackouts in New York and the surrounding region. 28 urban search and rescue teams were placed on standby. But even with federal support, local systems are stretched thin. They are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. When you step back from the day-to-day updates, a pattern emerges. The power grid failures during Winter Storm Fern followed the same script as previous major winter storms. According to energy analysts, the problem is particularly acute in southern states where electrical infrastructure was not designed for extended ice storms. Trees planted too close to power lines become falling hazards when coated in ice. Transformers fail in extreme cold, and utility crews, already working around the clock during peak summer heat, are stretched impossibly thin when winter disasters strike. The transportation system revealed similar vulnerabilities. Interstate 20 in Louisiana experienced multi-day traffic backups that lasted through the end of the week. In North Carolina, portions of Interstate 26 and Interstate 85 closed after more than 400 traffic accidents were reported. The aviation hub system, so efficient under normal conditions, collapsed when major airports like Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta became bottlenecks. A single storm took down more than 20,000 flights nationwide. The blood supply network showed how interconnected and fragile modern medical systems have become. According to regional blood banks, the cancellation of hundreds of donation events caused inventory levels to drop significantly just when hospitals needed reserves the most. Surgery schedules were adjusted. Trauma response plans were revised. The system adapted, but barely. There's also a deeper climate signal. According to climate scientists, a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means when cold air and storm systems do line up, the result can be heavier snow, more intense ice storms, and larger swings between unseasonable warmth and dangerous Arctic outbreaks. Winter Storm Fern arrived after several days of unseasonably mild weather across much of the country. The temperature whiplash made the cold even more dangerous. The human infrastructure proved just as vulnerable. Emergency shelters filled quickly in some areas. Homeless populations in cities like New York faced life-threatening exposure. Hospital emergency rooms saw spikes in hypothermia cases, carbon monoxide poisoning, and cardiac events related to snow removal. The question now is not only how to rebuild, but how to make sure the next Winter Storm Fern does not push the same systems even closer to the breaking point. According to the National Weather Service, another winter storm is already developing. Forecasters are calling for 8 inches or more of additional snow in Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine this weekend. Communities that are still digging out from the last storm are preparing for another round of power outages, flight cancellations, and hazardous travel. The systems that failed 2 weeks ago have not been fundamentally changed. They have only been patched back together, waiting for the next test. Tonight, Winter Storm Fern is fading from the weather maps and a new system is still approaching. But for millions of people, this winter will be remembered not by storm names, but by nights spent in cold houses, by long lines at shelters, and by the quiet fear of wondering what happens if the lights go out again. In the middle of that fear, there are also stories of resilience. Neighbors ran extension cords across yards to share power. Volunteers drove hours through dangerous conditions to staff emergency shelters. Line crews worked through the night in sub-zero temperatures to restore electricity. Hospital staff stretched dwindling blood supplies and postponed elective surgeries to ensure trauma patients could be treated. Communities that had never seen ice storms like this learned how to navigate them together. The 153 people who died during Winter Storm Fern will not be forgotten. Their deaths have exposed weaknesses in systems we depend on every day. The question is whether we will use this moment to build something more resilient or simply wait for the next disaster. We will keep tracking both the science and the human stories as this historic winter continues to unfold. If you found this update useful, consider sharing it, subscribing, and letting us know how these storms are affecting you and your family. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and stay prepared. How do you think your community should change after what this winter has revealed?